And good evening, everybody. Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from that mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone. Tonight is a really exciting night for me. First of all, I have a new producer, so I welcome Patrick onto the show with me. I am looking very much forward to working with him. He is experienced and he talks, and it's wonderful. Patrick, I'm glad you're here tonight.
Why, thank you, Barbara. It's my pleasure to be here to help you out.
Well, there has to be a techie here. I can talk, but the rest of it, not so much, not so much.
I'm not hardcore techie. I'm kind of halfway in the middle. I'm techie enough to be techie, but I'm not as techie as some.
You get me on the radio, that's all I care.
Right.
Tonight's guest is a really amazing lady. Her name is Marianne Bette. She's a family physician in Southbury, Connecticut, and that's the town where she was born and raised. She's a clinical professor at the University of Connecticut's Medical School, Quinnipiac University's Medical School, and the University of Vermont's Medical School. Busy lady. She went to Loyola University in Chicago and attended medical school at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And for 18 years, she lived and worked in the high desert of Palmdale and Lancaster, California, before moving back to Southbury 17 years ago. Now, while Marianne never anticipated becoming an author, as many writers know, sometimes there's a story that just won't let you go until it's written. And that's what happened to her. When Marianne's husband, Tom, asked her to write this book, she never thought she would. 12 years later, it has finally seen the light of day, and her hope is that in reading it, you connect to the people and ideals that are most important to you in living a fulfilling life. We're waiting for Marianne to call in. Don't know if she's quite made it yet. This is her very first interview. So when last I spoke with her, she was finding an adapter for her headset. So it may take her.
She's right here.
Okay. Is that you? Okay. Is that you, Marianne?
She probably has her mute on.
Okay. Well, that could be. Marianne, I see you, but I can't hear you. So check your phone, shake it up and down, throw it against the wall, and let's see if we can get you online.
How about now? Can you hear me?
I can hear the dogs and you, yes.
Wait a minute. We're getting organized. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
We're all
I can't
set.
do. So I don't know if I pressed the mute. How about now? Can you hear me?
You're fine. You're really good.
So it's almost like a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
Well, the funny thing is, I got this headset, but I can hear you on the phone.
Well, excuse me for interrupting like that, Barbara.
Sure.
Having the headset on with a phone may or may not be optimum. If you can hear on the phone, you may just want to go ahead and run with that, unless it so fails that you have to try the phones. But you're sounding real good. As long as you can hear us, we can hear you real well.
I can hear you fine now. I'm on just the phone, so I took the headset off, and I'm just doing just fine.
Okay. Well, I've given your bio and everything out to everybody. I haven't really told people the name of your book, though, of course, it was in the advertisement for the show that was all over Facebook.
Right.
Name of your book is Living with a Dead Man, A Love Story. And that is a title that will grab many people, and they'll look at it and they'll go, that's about it. It's absolutely open mouth. Okay. What, it pulls up all sorts of strange and weird pictures, but but it's not a strange and weird story. It's a very personal journey, and it was beautifully written, I felt. But you want to kind of give us a little an encapsulated version of the story of the book itself, and then why it took you 12 years to write it.
Okay, so you want me to tell you like what the story like beginning to end kind of a thing? Quickly?
Yeah, you don't have to go chapter by chapter. Just sort of.
No. So the story is about my husband's diagnosis with lung cancer, which showed up when he had a seizure, because we never knew it was in his lung. We only saw him have a seizure, and then we traced around to find out where this cancer started from, and that's what we found out. And then the story is about how we went forward trying to figure out, how we would best treat this thing, how we would got rid of the cancer that was in the brain, and then tried to treat the lung cancer, and then ultimately how that did not work. And then once we were through about 6 months of that, realizing it wasn't going to work, and then fell over into the, okay, so you're dying, now what do you want to do? And that took us on a completely different and strangely exhilarating journey to the end. And there was a lot of interesting things that happened in that process. Some of them were just so amazing to me. I kept saying to my husband, somebody's got to write a book. Somebody's got to write a book about this, because everybody's coming, they're asking for forgiveness, or you're asking for their forgiveness. I mean, there's all kinds of things were going on. And he looks at me and says, with those kind of rolling eyes over to the corner of your head, and he's like looking at me, and I said, don't look at me, I can't write. I said, I can't even spell, and I can't type, and I had all my boyfriends write my college papers, so I'm no good at this, I'm a scientist. So then he says to me, well, you've already got the title. And I said, oh, really, what's that? And he said, Living with a Dead Man. I was like, oh my God, that's just so typical of him, kind of, right up in the face with the title. So
yeah. Well, now he was a doctor as well. Well,
he was a psychotherapist. He didn't have his PhD. He had his master's in therapy. That's a 2-year program as opposed to a 4-year program. But they really are the best therapists. The masters in psychotherapy or
and what was his specialty?
Yeah. So anyway, that's the book, and then we go through the end to when we get to his memorial service, and that's basically the end of the book, except for the kind of some of the lessons that he talked about. And once he made the flip over to, oh, I'm dying, I better do my work here at the end.
Yeah. Now, what was his specialty in
Well,
in
his
treating
specialty, he was specialty was in death and dying. He loved to work with people who were like had a brush with death, or were possibly going to die, or if they lost a significant body part, like a breast or a leg or a hand or something. He liked working with those people the best.
Amazing that and then he gets to actually experience the whole thing, and you have to write the book.
Really.
Yeah, really.
That's typical of the whole relationship right there.
Well, much as this book is focused on dying, I found it was I would not say it's a book. I mean, the title says it's Living with a Dead Man. It tells you what's happening, and yet I found it a very enlightening and positive focus on the art of living as opposed to dying. So it was a book about life. It wasn't a book about death.
that's why when we came up with the title, I was like, the accent's got to be on living, not on the dead man, because there was more living that went on in that last half of his year with the cancer, and then the death. That last half a year was quite amazing.
Well, now, you being a doctor and a wife and a mother and an individual, I mean,
Right.
you had the opportunity or the curse, I don't know which it was,
Right.
to have to go through this experience from 3 or 4 different perspectives. I mean, as a doctor, you were analyzing things. As a wife, you were dealing with coming to terms with what was happening. As a mother, you were helping your children and trying to
Right.
keep everything together. And then there was the you part of it. And if I had to say that anything was really missing in the book, it was your perspective and what you were dealing with. And you took such great care, and you were so good with everything else. But I'm wondering if the purpose of this book as well was to take you through the whole journey and let you experience it finally from a different perspective, so that you could move on with your life in some way.
Well, people have said that to me, and I haven't yet bought it, because it just so much of my of who I am was those things at that time. It was that I was, and I don't really know that I thought that much about myself. In fact, it's only been since Tom's died that I have, and the girls have finally gone off to college, that I've lived by myself, which I absolutely adore doing, and I've learned a lot about myself. But previously, I didn't really delve into that much, because I just kept like jumping from mother to wife to doctor, and the doctor for me had always been kind of my safe haven, because I love doing it. I'm very good at what I do, and it just gives me such pleasure to do that kind of stuff. And so the fourth dimension there of myself has really just come about now that I am on my own. But the mother, wife, and doctor sometimes would be in such disagreements with one another in my head that it was just amazing. The mother would be saying, "Oh, you have to be more hopeful, and come on, be positive," and the doctor is like, "Get real. The guy's already, it spread to his head when we found it. It cannot be good," and the wife is like, "Oh my God, my husband's dying. How am I going to deal with this?" That kind of a thing,
Absolutely. I mean, my husband died of the same thing that Tom died from. So
Right.
I could truly relate to what you were going through. I think that an experience like this, once you've survived it,
Yes.
enhances your life and your sensitivity to all life to such an amazing degree that it's really phenomenal. And
Yes.
yes. But it's interesting, because you certainly have the empathy and the compassion, and you are a great doctor. There's no doubt about it. But having this experience, I think, makes you an even better one, because when you say to somebody, I know what this feels like, and I'm there for you.
Yeah.
People understand those kinds of words, and if they come and they aren't heartfelt, and if they aren't meant, and you can't understand something like this unless you truly have experienced it.
Exactly. And so many people's are different. I mean, I don't want to assume that everybody who's going through this is going to have this kind of an experience, but I will say that, especially given this time, that that you get through a few years after the death, and you start to think, wow, that was a life experience that I would not want to have missed, because it It does exactly what you say. It colors every cell in your body is like changed, and you look at things, and it's funny because some of my colleagues think that I am a big character, laughing and joking all the time, and I said, well, yeah. After you've been there with death with your husband, you realize that 99% of the other stuff that we worry about is so ridiculous, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And you just, like, you know, when people are talking to me about how do you keep your daughter's rooms clean, I was like, are you kidding me? You close the door. It doesn't matter, you know? And so, yeah, I do laugh a lot, and I do. Everything seems different. Everything is different.
It is, and I from what you know, the book had to have been an amazing catharsis for you.
Well, I keep waiting for that catharsis feeling, and I think this might be it, Barbara. Being on your show might be just the thing, because I just wanted people to get the feeling that if you stop being afraid of dying and you, I know embrace it sounds baloney, but if you just like accept the fact that you're going to die, we're all going to die, how do you want to do it? What do you want to do at the end? That the dying person has a tremendous amount of power, just more so than you have had in your life, because you can ask anybody to do anything you want. And you look at them and you think, they're dying and they're asking me to do this. Of course I'm going to do it. Whatever it is they ask, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's
even if it's peach pie for dinner.
You got it. You got it. One time Tom said he wanted banana cream pie. Never asked for that. I never saw him eat it the whole 16 years we were married. And we went out and bought banana cream pie somewhere. And he just thought that was delicious. And the whole time I'm looking at him eating it, I just couldn't get over it. It was just so funny.
Well, you know, I think, too, you guys spent a long time living in California. And California is definitely an area that is very open to metaphysical stuff and spiritual stuff. And not that either of you were wacko in it at all, but you were open to the possibility of bringing it into your life. And I think that he probably had to have been a lot more into it than possibly you even knew, because from some of the things that he went through with meditating and going into himself and going into examining his life and everything, that has such a metaphysical flavor to it.
Absolutely. And that is one of the delightful parts of accepting that you're going to die. You look, you see, what is, you know, like, I used to think that he was meditating on his immune system, which is, of course, what I would have been doing, you know, thinking about, getting my cells all buffed up and get in there and fight the cancer. No, he wasn't thinking of that at all. He would be thinking about things like, one time I came home and I snuck up to him. I thought he was sleeping, but he just opened his eyes and he just looked at me. And I said, I thought you were sleeping. He said, no, I was just thinking. I said, well, what were you thinking about? And he said, I was thinking that oftentimes in life I took things way too personally. I said, what? This is not at all what I thought was going on, you know. And I was like, well, okay, tell me what you're talking about. And he would explain it to me that life is for learning the lessons, and just because they come at you and they're hard doesn't mean something's wrong with you or you were bad, or, you know, it's just a lesson for you to learn. And, you know, I would sit down and it would just amaze me. Here's this guy I've been living with, we've been cooking, we have kids together. His mind was way into the expansion mode at that point, and so I frequently then got home, but would come home and ask him what he was thinking about, and I was always amazed because it was those kind of things. You know, he was
Mhm.
really reviewing life and his life and what people should know. That's the metaphysical part, I think.
Yeah, and it just it feels like you had the opportunities. You know, often, you know, people don't have almost a year to go through the different
Right.
phases that you went through. And but it is the way you look at things. It is, and it isn't just, you know, you have to be positive. It's you have to, it's not saying being positive, it is literally being positive,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
it's living it. And
He
it does, you know, and he went into so many he did drumming for a while with one of his friends.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Turns out my second cousin is a Native American shaman, which I didn't even know because his daytime job is landscaper. And so he came over here once he found out that Tom was going to stop chemotherapy and wasn't doing well and so forth, and he would come over every week and they would go in there and burn the sage and drum the drums. I don't know, was not a part of it um, until the end when Tom was too weak to drum anymore. But and they did all kinds of guided imagery and time travel and all kinds of stuff they did. I don't even after he died, I finally, when I was writing the book, I called up my second cousin and I said, I want you to explain to me what you guys were doing in there. And so this is in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said that it would be very difficult for him to explain because it's like trying to explain an experience through another language. And so I just had to accept a lot of, like he said, we were cleaning up some things in his past. We were there were some issues I think that he had with his mother that was already dead, and they worked on those. And then he worked, I don't even know, everything, I imagine.
Yeah, no, it's that kind of work is amazing work, and it's. I think the thing that impressed me so much was he wasn't actually looking for someone to heal him. He was looking for help to heal himself, which is on a spiritual, emotional level.
Right,
And
right.
that's an extraordinarily responsible way of looking at
Position.
something like this.
Well, when he told me that he didn't want to take any more chemotherapy, he just looked at me and he said, I know where I'm going. And he said, I don't want to be sick or feel sick at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I want everybody who wants to come to be able to come. And, you know, I want to be well enough to receive them and to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a tremendous amount of people that came and went, many of whom I didn't know because he was in AA, and he was a big proponent of Alcoholics Anonymous and self-help groups, and he was highly regarded by them. And many people came that I didn't know to be with him at the end. In fact, sometimes people would call me and say, I'm a friend of Tom's. Of course, I never heard their name before, so I knew that they were from the alcoholic programs. And say, I'd like to come and sit with Tom this afternoon, and you can, you know, go out and shop and do the things that you need to do. And they would come and they would either sometimes just sit with him, or they would talk with him, or they'd ask questions of him, or somehow he was very potent there at the end because of the work that he did on himself in trying to make himself ready for whatever is coming next.
Well, I would imagine he did spend some time on the other side as well, so that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's the you know, we tell people that they do go to another dimension. There is another dimension over there, out there, however you want to picture it. And so often people, are frightened towards the end. And when you're in the kind of place that he was in, I would imagine the transition was as peaceful as it could possibly be.
I would think so. I would think so. I've been around being a physician, I've been around a lot of dead people or dying people.
Yeah.
And it's tricky, because you have to figure out where a person is. You can't scare them with the information that you have, but you do want them to prepare themselves in whatever way that they can. And so some people are really ready to, and I think this is why Tom loved dealing with these kind of people. He said they're just really ready to move spiritually. It's just a big treat to work with people, because almost all the barriers of, that we throw up, like, well, I didn't mean it, or I didn't want to see it, or they're not into that at all if they're smart. They're like, okay, this is my last chance to get it. I want to get it. What is it? Let's talk about it. Let's get it out in the open. And that's
if he had survived this, it would have made him a phenomenal facilitator.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think with the book, you really have put him and his philosophy out there for anyone who is going through something like this, and living with cancer or any terminal condition changes the lives of everyone connected to that journey, not just the person making it, but to everybody. And it feels like his touch, his impact, the scope of the people that he touched with his wisdom and his philosophy during that year was phenomenal. And you have 3 kids, and it must have shifted their perception of life as we know it as well.
I'm sure it did. I think it traumatized my youngest daughter, who was 8 at the time. But my daughter that was 13 has just now graduated from med school and is going into training to be a family doc like her mom. And she says that she would never wish anybody to have the drop dead kind of a situation. She said because for her, the ability to have all the hugs and I love you and I'm going to miss you and you're not going to see me without my braces and all these heartbreaking situations were so important for her to have been able to talk to her dad about before he died. And she would have felt incredibly robbed of these experiences. Whereas my younger daughter that was 8, she was into denial almost right up until the very end. And it was just incredibly difficult on her. And then my oldest daughter, which is my stepdaughter, she was still living in California. She had a son and a husband, and they made it possible for her to come out because she wanted to be here and stay with her dad towards the end. And she came out and stayed here, and it bonded the 3 of us women together in a way. It just, there's no comparison. And for her to have been here with her dad was like, because her parents had divorced when she was about 8, and it was a major deal for them.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. But your youngest one, is that the one that rode horses and wanted a horse?
Yes.
And she's the one that's going to school to be a psychologist with an equine.
Yes, she is. She wants to be what they call an equine co-facilitated psychotherapy. So they don't do a traditional sit-down talking, but they actually you're with the horses. You're either in the horse barn or in the paddock or in the ring or something, and you talk about your problems, and the horses kind of react and move along with you, and bring out a lot of what's going on in your life. You kind of assign it to either a horse or the horses that are there, and it's powerful. It's a powerful type of psychotherapy, and she's all about the horses. She still has her horse. In fact, I spoke to her today. She was riding her horse, and that's where she wants to go with her life.
But don't you think that this whole experience opened her up to that too?
Oh, yes. Now that she's not so, she was enraged for a number of years, which made her almost impossible to live with. But, I think this whole thing, and she can talk about it now. When we get together, we all talk about it, and it's very interesting. And then we always have those conversations like, oh my God, Dad would love this, those kinds of things are still going on after all these 13 years he's gone now. So,
well, no, I would say that this book is certainly puts an amazing philosophy out there for people, because there is so much going on in this world when it comes to illnesses and disabilities and things like that. And the message that he had, was so profound. And it just feels to me as though, I know I talked to you years ago, and you jokingly said you were going to write a book, and I've read 2 versions of it. I like the 3rd version best.
Which version?
The last one, the one you actually published.
Oh, yeah, because the spelling's probably correct.
I didn't find any misspells, but it's kind of like it feels for you it was therapy of some sort. And everyone who goes through this kind of experience, everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own way of looking at it, and yet there is an underwriting or an overriding factor that if you can get to the point where you're bringing in the spiritual or the metaphysical, it enhances everything, and it allows you to you can't help but have to embrace it because it's ultimately there, but it gives you a different way of looking at things. And it's so many people, say it's not fair, and I'm cursed, and why am I so unlucky? And the reality is that it's not a matter of unlucky. It's another challenge. It's something else you have to move through, grow through, and be enhanced by.
Absolutely. And once, if you take that "oh poor me" attitude, you become the victim of your own life. That is the biggest travesty I think that someone can do to themselves. And hopefully in the book, it show. There's some hard parts in the book. There's some hard things that went on, and ultimately he died, and and he was 55, so that's relatively young, and so and he didn't get to. My oldest daughter just got married. I walked her down the aisle. He did not, he missed out on a lot of things, and but who are we to say what somebody else's life is about? And I personally believe that people usually, maybe not always, but in my understanding of it, that they don't leave before they've done at least some of the essential things they came here to do, whether they know it or not,
Oh, yeah.
So that, I don't know where I was going with that, but that's,
No, but it's true. I come from a different perspective, not the scientific one, but
Right.
but I really do believe that we have contracted to do certain things, experience certain things within this
Right.
lifetime. And it's not always, some people say, well, I was meant to be with so and so, or things like that. But sometimes the reason, the things we're here to accomplish are as simple as, smiling at someone in the grocery store and telling them they look beautiful. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes they are very simple things, and it's not necessarily for us to determine what they are. It's
Right.
important for us to live as best we can, and hope that we're crossing all our T's and dotting all our I's.
Well, I think it's a faith. I think in the past people have had faith in their religions and so forth, and I think that serves a certain function. But I feel like for me, my idea is faith in humanity and faith in life, and that if you well, how am I going to put this? If you believe that people are basically good and that we're here to do some good, then you don't have to ever take you have always the choice to decide whether you're going to take oh my God, I missed it, I should have married so and so from high school, and instead I ran up. No, I mean, there's just a million turns in the woods where you can go left or right, and you go where you're going, I think, for whatever the learning is, whatever the reason is you're going down there. And I think, looking back at this thing with Tom, that me living with him and me allowing him to live out the end of his life as he did, and for me to be a witness to that, was kind of almost dictated for me to have to write something about it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Now has this whole experience, I mean, I'm sure it has, but has this dramatically changed the way that you work with the people you work with, or your patients? Has it changed your philosophy of life and how you live your life in any way, shape, or form?
I think it has in a lot of different ways. I find it much easier as a physician to be with people who are in pain now. And I don't mean just physical pain. I mean people who, recently a husband and wife whose son overdosed and died, and they came in, and we just sat down and were together, and I just waited, let them talk. I didn't try to run in there and make them feel good. I just you just have to kind of share their story and their feelings and validate them. And I just find it much easier to listen to people and be there now, because I know they're not going to drop dead from this. They're not going to fall over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're in pain, and they should be from the experience. But I also have the hope and the knowledge that they're going to find their way through this, And so usually somebody has a death like that, like an unexpected death, which I find is much more difficult than the expected death, in that you don't have that preparation. And I find ways to keep making them come back every month to check on something or another, but I'm really having them come back so we can continue the grieving, talking about how they're dealing with those, because somebody dies in a shocking way, you could go on for years kind of not really staying in shock, just not really dealing with it in a more appropriate way.
Do you think that perhaps that and hopefully medical training is changing, is kind of getting more and more into the kind of counseling that a family physician would do in helping people through times like this, because I know there really isn't. I mean, there are grievance circles and things like that all over the place, but it seems to me that it should be a part of, if you're treating the body, then the spirit's connected, and not that you have to go into private practice for that particular thing, but just an awareness of everybody knows the different stages of grieving and yada yada, but that's not living it and trying to get day to day to day and surviving and then starting to thrive. That can be a loop that people get into where they are just surviving and they aren't thriving, and to break that cycle sometimes after 5 or 10 years or wherever long it is, can be very difficult.
Yes, this patient just popped into mind when you were saying that to me, because this woman was talking to me about her sister and how her sister died of breast cancer and how she lost all this weight and her hair fell out, and it was so painful, and she was so bitter, this patient of mine, talking to me about her sister, and it shouldn't have been that way, and it wasn't supposed to, and all of that. And I said, why are you saying that? And so she just looked at me, and I said, what if that was her gift for you to really realize that she had to die? Because, when you see somebody and they've lost 80 pounds and they look like stink, you're almost saying to them, well, you better go, because you can't hang around here like that. It's just not going to work. And this woman was so shocked by my saying that to her. And the next time she came in, she said, I can't even tell you what an impact that had on me, because she said, all these years I've been harboring this feeling of being robbed and seeing my sister's health being robbed from her. She said, but if I look at it the way you're talking about it, she said, I don't have all the anger. And I said, yeah, because if she was going to die, I mean, you got to die some way, and that was her way. That was her way. And you seeing her go kind of made it obvious that she was dying, and so, but that just blew her mind. And if I could just help people to get to that point where they're not so emotionally or spiritually crippled by the experience, because in our culture we have all these shoulds and shouldn'ts, and I don't know that matches up with what the other dimensions have in mind for all of us,
Well, there's no handbook, unfortunately, but
right.
It's kind of it's interesting, because when I deal with doing past lives for people and stuff like that, and some people just give you such a weird look, because you say that they were either beheaded or hanged or stabbed to death or whatever, and it's like, you've had thousands of lifetimes. The only way to get from one lifetime to another is to pass away.
Yeah.
And it all can't be going to sleep at night and not waking up in the morning.
No, and that, no, not at all.
I mean, it's sort of like if you're going to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, there are thousands of different pathways you can take, but the ultimate goal is the same.
Yeah.
You're going to hit an ocean sooner or later. But that's what life is, and you never know. And reading your book made me far more cognizant of how important every day is to make sure that I don't leave something undone that I could finish, because it was sort of like, I mean, there are certain things that will be undone forever, I'm sure, but it's kind of like, it's important to fill every day with richness and love and compassion and grace. And
Right.
and I feel that Tom hit at some point that place where that's all he did. That's all he filled his life with. And
Right.
and it was a beautiful transition from going to all of the different therapies and all of the different things and everything to the realization that he did not give up, and that's how that's one thing that I think it's important. He didn't give up. He surrendered to a process that took him to a better place. And that's
Right.
not quitting, and that's not losing a battle. That's making a transition, and there's a big difference.
Oh yeah. Oh, I totally agree with that. And I think he was kind of like leading the charge there for a while.
Mhm.
And I took him to his Alcoholic Anonymous meetings until he couldn't sit in the wheelchair anymore. And we had a little system worked out where he would come in, I'd put the wheelchair up to the car, get him in the car, throw the wheelchair in the back, run down to the church, get the wheelchair out, put him in the wheelchair. Usually somebody would come out and help me. And then when he was tired, he had this little look where he rolled his eyes towards the door to tell me he wanted to go, and I'd just get up and say, well, he's tired, it's time to go. And but when he would talk at these meetings, it was as if one of the disciples was there giving some kind of information from on high. People would just hang on his every word, and he had quite a mind, and he had quite a good insight. And he would, when they would like have this time where they read a passage from the big book, and then he would, everybody would say something about it. Not everybody, but people who wanted to say, well, this made me think of this or that. But when he had something to say, he often would start like, well, we alcoholics, we like to think da-da-da-da, the way that disease takes people to these certain points. And he would bring those up, and he would say, but that's why we became alcoholics, because that wasn't the healthy way to do it. These are my words of what he said, but people would just look at him. I would look, because I was a kind of a visitor. I just got to look around and watch this whole amazing process go on. And people loved to hear what he had to say, and he always brought it back to the spiritual, always brought it back to the alcoholism, and brought it back to the work that they had to do. People just loved it. They just loved it.
But there was obviously respect there, because he was going beyond the work that he had done initially, and he was hitting on another level of consciousness and bringing other wisdoms in and sharing them with them. And it was I'm pretty sure he couldn't walk on water, but probably just about.
He could not walk on water. He couldn't even stand up in the shower.
Well, but the mind was still there, and that's amazing. I mean, when you still have the mind and the consciousness and the ability to stretch yourself into that space and pull stuff through and share it with other people, I'm sure that there was amazing wisdom there that people got and have been able to apply to their lives and utilize. And so his words, his thoughts, his generosity of spirit certainly touched hundreds, probably thousands, maybe even more lives. And I think your book does bring that out. I think it does put people into the place where they look at themselves, and he didn't suddenly go running to a faith healer or suddenly get involved in some sort of weird la stuff. Yeah, no, and he knew where to go, and it was inside, and that's where all the good stuff is. And so he may not have been practicing it up to that point, but he sure as hell knew where to look. So that there probably had been times in his life that he had touched upon it and said, well, I'll get to that later on sometime.
Oh, I bet. That sounds just like Tom. Yeah.
But and it's kind of like you sit and you look at something like this, and I met you right as he died, or I think I met you probably the year that he passed, to be honest with you, because I think it was about 12 years ago.
Right.
And I never would have known that your husband had passed away. You have always been, you have a great strength, and that obviously was there. And certainly when my husband got ill, you were wonderful. You said, I'll be there with you every step of the way, and you actually were. And it was comforting. It really was. But everybody faces this threshold differently.
Yes, they do. Some run from it, and those poor people. I feel sorry for them, because, like one of the quotes in the book, how every chapter has a quote from mostly patients, some friends that have said something about death. And this one patient of mine said that when you sit at the foot of a dying man's bed, you realize that there's nowhere else in the world you would rather be. And that pretty powerful stuff, because I think a lot of people would probably run from that. But if they could calm down and be there, they would. It just would be a transformation for them.
It is, and it it's I had one woman whose husband was in a nursing home, and he was comatose, and she said to me, I don't know what to do. And she said, can you tune into him and ask him what I'm supposed to do?
That's a good challenge.
And I did, and she said, what does he say? And I said, he wants you to do for him exactly what you would want him to do for you. And it was putting it back in her lap, but
right.
She said, okay, then I know exactly what to do.
Good for her.
Well, it's funny, because she was the older, and she thought that she would go first, and so she had given him directions on what to do when she and because he was like 10 years younger, she was sure that she was going to outlive him, and then he's the one that got sick and passed away. So
a surprise to her. Yeah,
it was amazing. We're coming close to the top of the hour, and at some point music is going to start to play, and that is our signal that we have 3 to 5 minutes to get some water, or go to the bathroom, or stretch, whatever is appropriate. Cool. So when that music does start, mute your phone and talk to the dogs or whatever, and then come back and unmute or whatever, because your phone will be live for that entire time. So
okay, well, with my luck with electronics, I think I'll just put the phone down and go in another room, because I might turn you off accidentally.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
No, I don't want to do that.
But it's so. Just out of curiosity, have you felt Tom around you at all since the book has been finished?
There have been some times. Yeah, there's been some times where I've felt he was around, and here's an interesting story about that with my youngest, Justine, because my husband had told her, that if she wants to be with him or talk with him, that she should just lie quietly, and and so she's thinking, he's talking metaphysically and she's talking very physically. So she was so pissed off that she came to me one day and she said, Dad said he could talk to me and that he could communicate with me, and he can't, and she's going on, and she's all mad and everything, and off she goes to school. So on the way, and because of the Native American thing, Tom loved all these feathers and dream catchers and all the drumming and stuff we did, Native American drumming. And so she comes home from school. We live in the country, so she comes home from school and she comes down the driveway, and I think she finds 3 turkey feathers placed in the driveway, different places coming down the driveway. And she comes in the door holding the turkey feathers with that, oh my God, look on her face. And I said, well, who knows where he is? It's not like he could just use the telephone. Maybe this is what he can do to let you know. And so that changed her mind. That changed her mind.
The subtleties,
and,
the subtleties are there. It's
you have to. It's very challenging for those of us who either don't want to believe that or have a very scientific mind like mine to pick up all the little things. And I think I had a tremendous help in writing the book from the other side, because I wrestled and wrestled with this book for 12 years. And like I said, I really, literally am the world's worst speller. And I could not even type when I started this thing. And sometimes I would throw that book in the corner of my living room, and I'd say, I am not doing it. It is too hard. No, I'm not doing that. Go do something else. And then a few days later, I'd wake up in the morning, and I'd have...
Marianne, we're back.
Yes, I'm back.
Yes, you are. I'm glad you didn't go anywhere.
No.
We've been talking about a lot of things that happened with Tom and with your family, and the thing that for me is the most important thing is that everything was kept very positive. I mean, yes, there were moments of tears, and of course there were, but life is a celebration, and as long as you're up and breathing, and lots of people say, well, the best thing this morning is that I was able to get up out of bed, but there's so much more to life, and being around someone who has made transition, I think, personally gives you a greater appreciation for life and the positive things that are in life. And sometimes we just don't acknowledge all of the wonderful positive things that are there because we're going through a tough time. And Tom seemed to be able to keep a very good perspective on all of that.
Absolutely. Even one time he was talking to my stepdaughter, his daughter from previous marriage, and he's like, oh yeah, I've got this cancer thing. I got to, figure out how to beat this. And then, and he's talking about it like it's a cold. And where does he get that attitude? I think somewhere along the line he told me he just didn't want to be spending his interaction with this family and people that he loved with this kind of terror or fear kind of attitude, and it's very much tried to stay positive, even though I had to call my stepdaughter up and say, listen, your dad's thinking this is a cold. This is not a cold. There's a good chance that he's not going to be able to beat this, which she had absolutely no idea about. But so it's got to kind of be that blend of positive and reality. I keep coming back, though, to the idea of it's got to be your attitude about everything. Because, so much, I really think a lot of what we think is or isn't or should or shouldn't be is so culturally driven And
Mm-hmm.
if you stay on that, what I will call a more superficial plane about life, get your house and your dog and your kids, that's only one dimension of a multi-dimensional life.
Mm-hmm.
And and like I say, who am I to say what somebody else's life is supposed to be? But I do know, like you said earlier, when you go through one of these experiences, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, and you should be positive and should get through this. Life is full of many, many beautiful, every day, so many things. And if you're grumping around because you didn't get a raise or your car had a flat or, whatever it is, you're wasting time, I think.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that. There's a statement out there that you create your reality by your perception of it. And
Okay.
I don't know, nobody knows how they would react if given a terminal diagnosis of any sort. But and you we'll never know unless and until it happens. So that everybody would like to say, well, I would do this and this, and this is how I would react. But the reality is, you don't know until it actually happens to you. But if moving up to that particular point in time, you have created a reality where everything is of a positive nature, where there is a joy of every moment, and all right, not every moment, but most. You then have created an environment for which there will be a more positive reaction to whatever comes your way. So he was not, I mean, he had his warts and stuff like everybody else did, but on a whole, he had a really good handle on how to face life and how to live life and how to deal with the difficulties that come into life. And did he stumble here and there? Sure. But there isn't a person out here that I mean, I have knees with scars on them. So
Sometimes those are your little gifts in disguise, because we're not looking at it that way.
mm-hmm.
I mean, not that
No.
I'm walking around all the time saying, well, give me all the shit in the world and I'll make, candy out of it. No. But, if you can look at it like, okay, well, what am I supposed to learn out of this? Or what is this? What is the bigger picture? What is this all about? Or, how can you minimize things that seem so dastardly? Yeah, that's, I think, a smart, healthy way to go.
Oh, absolutely. And one of your chapters was called "It Takes a Village," and it does. It absolutely does. And so many people going through a situation like this, where a child or a parent or a spouse is in transition, is passing over. And they seem to, they have a tendency to lock themselves away and close themselves off from everybody else. But there is a whole world out there that can and will be supportive of them if they give it a chance.
It's amazing. It's amazing how connected we, as a family physician, I know everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
In the body, in the mind, in the family. One person gets sick, everybody's, like, especially if there's a cancer thing, it's on everybody's mind. It kind of is pervasive, it's just, you're trying to think about it all the time, and it creeps in at the silliest times. And when you live in a small town like this, well, it's not that small anymore. It's about 20,000 people. But when I grew up here, it was only about 1,500.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my point is that people want to do things to help you if you're in some kind of a jam.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult for me and probably many other people to accept help, and more difficult to ask for help. But I think that's part of the process of being connected, is you have to let go of some of those, we really value our independence, the way we live. And maybe that's not all good anyway.
Well, it does become a fascinating thing, and not everybody is gonna. I mean, I have to, be honest. When Patrick came down, when he was diagnosed, there were people that I knew that I thought, would be very supportive. That literally didn't call at all. But
Yep.
but then there were people that it never occurred to me that they would be supportive, that we're here. Can we cook for you? Can we help you out? Can we, people who just suddenly turned up at the door to just sit back and sit and talk with Patrick. I mean, there were people that just drifted in, and it was an amazing experience. And some of the people that I thought, for sure would be there with a casserole every night, I didn't see until after he passed away. So,
Yes.
and that's human nature. Some people deal with things one way and some people deal with them another way. And, you just have to say, well, that you know who not to call on in case of an emergency, for sure. But it is strange, because sometimes people will, I had some people that called and said, would you like me to drop by? And, they weren't the kind of, they weren't the people that I thought would. And I always said, sure, come on by. And it was amazing to see the kind of support that you get if you're open to it.
That's, there's the catch right there. You can't say, oh no, I don't need anything, or no, this. You never say no in those situations. Some people brought things and said, now here's a meal, but it can be frozen. It can be cooked tonight. It can be cooked next week. You can give it away if you don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people were so incredibly thoughtful. I had that one couple that made a crock pot meal. Every Friday they brought a crock pot. This was for like 12 weeks, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
Brought a pot meal that could be, I could have put the crock pot in the fridge, or I could have plugged it in any old time. And every Monday I'd say, oh, thank you, I think I'm all right now. But every Thursday I'd be praying for that crock pot to show back up, because my cooking skills were in the basement. I had no clue how to put things together, especially since Tom was the cook all these years we were married. I didn't even shop. I mean, he did all the shopping and the cooking.
Wow.
So, but yeah, and other people did other things too. Like there's one of the things about my cousin Bob in there, who is a plumber, and he lived up in Massachusetts. And he calls me up and he says, I'm coming down on Saturday morning. I'll be there about 9 or 10. And he said, and I'm going to work, and then you're going to feed me lunch, and then I'm going to work some more, and then I'm going to go home for dinner. And I said, what are you going to work on? What are you talking about? And he says, things that need to be done. I said, I don't really need anything, Bob. I can't even think of anything. He said, well, make a list. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you'll figure it out. I'll see you when I see you Saturday. Well, by the time the guy came, I had a list that probably could have taken him 2 days, because there were so many things that if something broke, I just left that aside and picked up something else and went to that,
Mm-hmm.
And like, he came and he helped clean the gutters. At that time we had a motor home. He like winterized the motor. I mean, I didn't do those things before, so they didn't even come up on my radar screen,
Mm-hmm.
so when he came along, that was wonderful. So I think making a list is a great idea, or even better yet, say I'm going to come over there and I'm going to do some cleaning or some laundry, or I'm going to do something. I'm going to help somehow, and then you can figure it out when you get there, you know?
Oh, yeah. And sometimes you just need somebody to talk to.
Really?
Yes.
Exactly. It's not it's not as hard as it could be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because mostly, if you're the person that's coming, all you have to do is listen and shake your head and say, yeah, or, oh, gosh, or tell me about that.
Yeah.
You do.
No, it was definitely an amazing time for you. And your girls seem to have done, you know, while your youngest definitely had trouble letting go.
Oh, yeah.
She sounded, as you portrayed her, as though she was in many ways older than her years.
Right. Yeah, I think she's an old soul. Yeah.
And but she was amazing. And you know, you kind of you see and hear a story like this, and all you can think of is, geez, I would really hope that if I was in that situation, that I would have the balance and the strength to be able to go through it with the same amount of togetherness. I mean, you know, I'm really good in an emergency, but you know, I lose it shortly thereafter.
We had this conversation, I think, once upon a time.
Yes,
where
we
it's
did.
like, you and I are the ones to count on in the emergency. We're cool, calm-headed, we know what to do, but then fall apart later on down the line.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
There are, but it's sort of like, it's going to sound strange, but no matter what the circumstances, and appropriately, please, but if you can bring laughter into any situation, there is a healing process that takes place, and it's amazing, because no matter how bad it is, if you can just get whoever it is to chuckle just a little or to smile just a little, you know that there are, and if you want to go scientifically, there are endorphins that are released that
Sure.
raises the spirit. So it's and I don't mean stand-up comedy, but
Yeah.
but I mean, my mother, in her last years, we hit the emergency room, oh gosh, maybe 3 times a month at least. I swear,
My God.
you know, it was, I would point at her and say heart condition, no matter what her problem was, because if you have a heart condition, they take you right in. And I swear they were going to dedicate a cubicle to her, you know, and it got to the point where no matter what was wrong with her, the doctors would come in and say, how are you, Dorothy? And she'd say, I'm fine. And it would be like, you can't breathe. You're having a heart attack. What the hell are you saying I'm fine for? And you know, it's kind of like, you must be joking. But she had, I mean, and there's some things you can do. If you have a senior citizen that you're caring for or living with, I had a knapsack that was always by the door, and it had a deck of cards, it had some books, it had a toothbrush, it had toothpaste, it had you know, just those things that you will need if you're going to have to be in the hospital overnight or whatever. And and not only that, but the other thing that I always had in there was 10 copies of her medications. So instead of, because if you're in the emergency room, yeah, I mean, so we had the emergency pack, and you know, the ambulance guys knew to grab it after the last couple of, you know, trips that we made. It was like, here we go. And I will never forget one time it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and the police had been there, and you know, the ambulance was there. She couldn't breathe. Her lungs were filling up with water, and I was riding in the ambulance, and we're going through the town, and it's quiet as, you know, lights flashing and everything. And I said, how much is this little ride costing my mother? And, you know, they no, I said, how come no siren? And they said, well, there's no traffic. And then I said, how much is this little ride costing my mother? And they told her, and from the back of the ambulance,
She's screaming.
croaking, for that kind of money, I want the siren too.
Want the full treatment.
Yep, they turned it on. But you
great.
know, it was sort of like, there was no moaning and groaning and crying and everything. If you can, in a situation like that, have a light heart. And you know, I'm not saying that you throw laughter in, you know, but you can almost, yeah, you can almost throw it in everywhere. And the aspect of laughter and lightheartedness does help you through so many situations.
I'm telling you, that humor is the best medicine.
And without you got to have a sense of humor. And your sense of humor and Tom's sense of humor is so very, very profoundly there in your book.
Thank God.
I mean,
you when you said that, it reminded me of this time we're all trying to get out of the house. We're late, of course, because, you know, each girl separately had to run back up to their bedrooms and get something, or their perfume or lipstick, or I don't know what it was. And we're all running out, and we're going down this hallway into the garage. And at this point, my husband is totally bald because, you know, and he had a very full head of hair, and flow therapy made all the hair fall out. So we're all scurrying down the hallway, and he goes, "Wait!" And we all freeze. And then he does this little thing with his pinky he like sweeps it over his bald head, and he goes, "How's my hair?" And we're just all hysterical. I mean, it just changed everything from tense running. And a lot of that was he had determined to do that. He said, "I don't want to have my children see me dying with seizures and throwing up or some other kind of thing. I don't want them to remember me yelling. That's not how I want my kids to remember me." And so he had a lot of conscious, you know, focus on keeping it up, keeping it light in ways that he could.
Well, he also had come to peace with a lot of things inside of him too.
Oh yeah.
You know, there were no issues or anything, and I think one of the neat things, I forget which version of your book, but you talked about your living room and how there's a huge fireplace with stones that goes all the way up cathedral ceiling-ish, and he meditated on the stones, and you spoke about how you tried it and you kind of got lost in the cement someplace.
You could look, you know, you could have one idea, and then you would look through, like if you were like looking like a typewriter, or just, you know, focusing on a few levels at a time as it went up. Every time you went up, you know, a few feet, your mind would go off into some other direction. Yeah, I think I said you could. By the time you got to that fireplace, you could be on another planet. Just all the thoughts that you go through.
And he probably was. And, you know, his process sounded so fascinating. You kind of wanted to be able to tune into it. And I think you did such a beautiful job of representing your perception of what was going on. And you know, when you were giving your perception, I was standing back saying, well, that could be, but it could be this too. And, you know, and the book allows the reader, even though you've interpreted, it allows the reader to put their own perception and understanding into what's going on. And it's a wonderful blueprint for anyone. And you know, sooner or later, we all come to that time in our lives where we kind of are saying, well, my time may be up shortly or whatever. And you look at that and you say, you know, how do I want to approach this? I mean, and no matter how you want to approach and manipulate it, obviously the universe has its own idea. So whatever plans you make are not going to be the way it actually happens. But I think it's an important part of life to face the fact that at some point in time you will make transition to another plane where you get to start playing all over again.
and in whatever way and whatever time frame and whatever all that means,
Mm-hmm. Well, he absolutely, I'm sure, did not think he was going into nothingness. He knew he was going somewhere.
Yeah, I think he'd been there for coming and going for a bit,
Oh, absolutely.
Well, one time I came home and my housekeeper, which I, definitely needed then, if not before then, would come on Tuesdays and help clean the house. And she knew Tom. She was from the meetings, and one day I came home and she was like, all frenetic, all running around, just polishing and talking a mile a minute. I said, "What's going on with you?" She said, "The spirit's in there." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I don't know what went on in that bedroom today with him and Rick, but there was a lot of spirit." She said, "Marianne, there's always some spirits here when they're together." She said, "But this was a red letter day, full of spirits, all happy." She says, "They're all excited about him coming." I said, "Are you kidding me?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Why didn't you tell me about this?" She said, "Well, it didn't seem that important, but today there's a lot of them here." And she said, "And they hung around for a long time after Rick left." And she's pointing to the great room. So I walk into the great room because I want to get this feeling too, right? I want to get this understanding. And I go in there and I get absolutely zero. And I thought I was pretty tuned in, so trying to pick up on this. There's absolutely nothing happening. I'm trying to get more information out of Gail, my housekeeper, and now she's polishing every horizontal surface in the place is like absolutely like perfectly clean and shiny from her cleaning in frenzy. And we never could figure out what went on. And when I asked Tom, he fell asleep. I didn't know whatever went on, but I'm sure something went on because, there's a lot of powerful energy around here at that point in time.
Yeah, that's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, well, you think, I don't know. I thought, because I was putting all of my hard effort into it, I should have gotten something out on that end too, but I didn't. I mean, I never got that feeling. I got a lot of feelings about the book, though. The book, I got a lot of, I got to the point where I would lay down at night and say, I have no idea how to write this, how to put this particular story into the book or how to write about it. And darned if I wouldn't get up and I'd have an idea and I slept with a pad of paper and a pencil next to my bed. And I would get up and I would write those things down immediately before I'd lose them, And some of them definitely I used in the book. Some of them didn't really play out the way I thought they would. But I just felt like I just got a lot of spiritual help when I was stuck.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I've often been inspired in the middle of the night. And I, for the longest time, I had a pad of paper and a pencil on the nightstand. And I would, come out of a dead sleep and I would write something down. And I would be so proud of myself that I could, rest and, it'll be there in the morning and I'll be able to pick it up and I'll run with it. And there is not one time that I did that I could read my handwriting. It was so frustrating. It was like, what was I thinking?
That is great.
It's just, so now, if it's that good, I will get up and I will come to the computer and I will type it out.
Oh, well, you could have just flipped the light on and put your glasses on and seen what you were writing.
Well, yeah,
just a phrase or something down.
That would have been a thought. I got the first 4 lines of a poem at one point, and when I said, I'll just finish it tomorrow night, or more will come. Nothing ever came, but I have 4 lines of a poem, and I know there's more, but haven't the faintest idea.
4 lines right there.
Yeah, well, it's an unfinished symphony at the moment. So you've now got a book under your belt.
Yes.
So what's next? I mean, you can't stop now because you did such a great job.
Oh, man, I know. It was so painful, and I said I would never do anything like that again. It was as hard, if not harder, than getting into medical school, which was very difficult for me. And now I find myself getting all these ideas again, and a lot of it starts with my patients. And, I was with this woman the other day, and she had read my book, and she said, you have to write a book on grieving now, right? And I said, what? Wait a minute. Who are you? What? You're not even one of my really tight patients. I see you maybe once a year. What are you telling me I have to write a book? She said, oh, Dr. Bette, she said, when my mom died, she said, I was so unprepared for grief. She said it took me 5 years to get my head above water. She said, you have to write a book about grief because nobody knows about that either until it hits them. And she said, just to have people know what some people go through or what could be expected, and that it's okay to have, such a difficult time. And I was like, oh, my God. So now I've got a little stack of papers, which is about 10 papers deep, because now all of a sudden everybody seems to be talking to me about grieving, and then some of the patients that have been quoted in my book, they're asking me if I'm going to write another book, and I said something about, well, I'm going to have to write about grieving, and they're like, oh yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, it's funny because it's everybody has their own time frame and their own, and I remember talking to one woman, and she said, everybody says that I should now be ready to move on with my life, and I'm not ready yet. And, she said, the books all say it should only take this long, and I'm just not ready. And I said, well, I think you should give them the same answer that Michelangelo gave the Pope when the Pope came in, kept looking up at the Sistine Chapel and saying, when will it be done? And Michelangelo just looked down from his ladder and said, it'll be done when it's done. And but sometimes we do get caught in those loops. Sometimes, the what has appeared to be a groove becomes a rut, and we can't get out of it. And there.
Good analogy, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, groove is one thing, and a rut is being stuck there.
It's a lot deeper. Yeah. And when somebody, sometimes lots of times people know that they're stuck in a spot in grief, and they want to break out, but they don't know how. Now, I mean, aside from good drugs, which we're not going to advocate,
right.
How do you tell a person, or what can a person do when they know that they are just caught in this loop and they don't know how to break out of it?
Yeah. Are you asking me that question right now like you would like an answer to that?
Yeah. Huh. There have to be a ton of different ways to do it.
Oh, I think there are, and I think each person is going to have to find their own, like that Peter Pan happy thought thing. You keep your happy thought, and it keeps you above water. It keeps you flying, because, there's no sense in staying down under the covers all day.
No, and sooner or later you have to wash the sheets.
Yeah, and I think actually those things are what I call side trips. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you assume that your life is going from here to there, like you said, like from here to California. Well, if you decide you're going to Florida, okay, but that's really not your goal. You're taking a side trip, and when you come back from your side trip and you're still going to be in Pennsylvania, you still have to go to California.
Mm-hmm.
So I call those side trips, and you have to do those side trips for as long as you, hopefully they're short. If they're not, then they're not. And if you can make it shorter, good for you.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah,
so
just stay on your side trip. Maybe that's what your whole life is about, the side trip this time. I
that
don't
could
know.
be.
I like to think it's going to California.
Well, I mean, and then there are people that just, they lose. I had a friend once who lost his 8-year-old son, and 20 years later, he still was in that place where he couldn't move on with his life. And I'm not sure he wanted to. And, there are people that I guess just can't bear to go on without the person that they're missing. I mean, there are those people.
Yes, yes. However, I think two things about that. One, sometimes when pain is the only feeling that you have left, you don't want to give that up,
Mm-hmm.
because at least you're alive and you're real because you're hurting. But then some people like to be hurting like we're a badge, like proving how much everything meant to them, and then that's counterproductive, I think.
Yeah, well, I tell those people the Martyr Club is closed and not taking applications. Yeah.
Really. Yeah, you just can't. And you know what? I think you and I can say things like that to people because of our history of dead husbands, and I think it gives you a lot of leverage, really. I mean, there are times when I've said things to people and they look at me and they say, so I know you're telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And because they know my history of the dead husband, so that can give you some significant leverage. Not that I can say, oh, I know because my husband died, so I know what it's like for you with your husband dying. But no, I've faced what I faced, and so you're facing what you're facing. But there's a lot of similarities or analogies that can be drawn between one experience of another, which is basically why I wanted to write the book, so that people could think a little bit about, so you don't have to take chemotherapy to the last week of your life, You could throw it off and party it up and have a good time. I think there's just a lot of ways to do it, I guess.
Oh, geez, yeah. Well, Patrick wouldn't do the chemotherapy or the radiation, and because he wanted to do homeopathic and holistic, and I think had his cancer been a stage 1 or 2, he might have had good success with it because he was a fanatic. But he was stage 4, but he did have quality of life right to the end. And at one point, when he had we had done some tests and they had said no, it's not cancer, and we came home and he was building a deck here, and he was hard at work, and everything was positive and wonderful, and the next day he was out there working again, and we got a call from the oncologist, and no, it was stage 4 lung cancer. And so he sent the kid who was working with him home, and we sat here and we talked about it, and he said, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, whatever you decide, I'm behind you 100%. And, we'll do whatever it is you feel you need to do. And so he said, okay. And we talked a little bit more, and he said, well, what should I do right now? And I said, you should finish the deck.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
you got a couple months easy here. So
Yeah.
so he finished the deck. But it's but it's everybody is different in how you apply yourself. But a book in grieving is really, it would be an important thing for a lot of people. I mean, certainly there are the different stages of grief, and that everybody knows about, and stuff like that. But there have to be procedures that you can work on in your life to help get you, beyond those stages and into a functional life once more, because we're all here for a purpose and a reason, and most of them, it's not to quit living and sit and wait, because
no, or to give up.
Yeah.
The I wanted to say something about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who I had held in very high esteem until I went through this process myself. And then I realized that those stages of whatever, death and I think it's of death, a lot of it is, it's not right. There's a myth that you go through these stages. Well, you could go through the stages, all of them, in the span of about 3 seconds.
Yep.
You can find it's unbelievable, and then come to grips with it, and then be angry, and then maybe come to grips with it, or come to some resolution. And so I thought, here I am, a physician. I'm going through this, and I'm thinking there's some steps here that I can read a book and I can get through this stuff. Well, no. No, there is nothing, and those stages are, it's completely different. It's completely different when you're trying to live it and go through it. And if you can take, you have hundreds of people that you've talked to about death, and you can glom up all this stage and add all the other ones into this other stage, fine. But that is not the way it goes. A person goes through it. And it's not
well,
like
then
you complete one stage and then you're allowed to go on to the other. No, none of that.
It's not like grade school, no. But don't you think then perhaps it's time for a new paradigm or a new philosophy on the art of grieving?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's my way of grieving for Patrick was to go right back to work. And somebody said to me, 3 or 4 days after, they realized I was back counseling people who had lost their spouses, and Patrick was the ashes were still warm, and and she said, you shouldn't have to be doing this. And I said, look, this is how I heal. And I'm not going to sit and go through a case of Kleenex, because that makes me a hypocrite, because I believe he's gone on to a wonderful place that he was waiting to go to, and that the Chinese have it right. When a baby is born, they wear black, and they grieve and they mourn because of the difficult life that that soul is going to endure. And when someone dies, they wear white and celebrate because they have, survived life and are going on now to a different realm and a better place.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know that.
And so it's kind of like, and for months, this woman would call me and she'd talk to me and say, you're still in denial. And I said, no, trust me, I know Patrick is not here anymore, but just because he's not here doesn't mean he's gone. Right. And, his energy is here. His thoughts are here. His presence is still here. So why should I be unhappy? He's not doing some of the chores he used to do. So, that was annoying. But it's everybody's philosophy is different, but everybody has grief, and everybody does go through this process, and I think maybe a book that gives people permission to have their own process would be a good idea.
Well, I'm thinking along those lines myself, and I have some. I haven't gotten to the point of developing chapters yet, but I have some. When I hear wonderful statements that people say to me, and it makes me kind of think of a whole fan of ideas, I write those down on those little pieces of paper, and then I stack them all up, and then at some point, and I won't do anything in the summer when I'm out in the garden because that's where I am all the time. I'll get in the winter, I'll sit down and I'll start to put some of those things into little stories, little collections, and that's how I write. I'm not proficient at that. I'm not really that great at it, but I'm a great storyteller. So if I can tell stories that can flow together into a book, then I think I'll have a home run for that one.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, so many people who have a book in them, think that they have to read a book on how to write a book or take a class on how to write a book. And you didn't do that. And it's your voice. And I think that's what makes it, so enjoyable to read, because it is your voice talking. It's not you trying to shove your story into somebody else's outline or theory or this is how you write a book. This is how you write a paragraph. You didn't do that. You wrote it as though you were talking, and because your voice is there, it pulls people into the story so beautifully that it is literally a pleasure to read. And it's not a depressing book. It's really an amazing book. And you have one place there where one of your daughters, I don't know if it was the youngest or the oldest, decided that she was so angry at cancer she wanted to use the F-bomb, and
She was the youngest, yeah.
And you seriously thought about it and decided it was a good time to bomb the place, and you helped her.
It was.
And it was moments like that where just the humanness of the whole situation, and I can see you with this little kid, throwing F-bombs all over the place.
Yeah, all about cancer. Yeah. So she said, I want to use the F word, and I said, on what? And she says, cancer. And I said, oh, well, I'll have to think about that then. Otherwise, we had a strict policy, no swear words in the house. But that subsequently has dissipated.
Well, as people get older, they don't need those kind of rules anymore.
But you can't enforce them anyway when they're older.
No,
but
not
anyway,
even.
It's very appropriate at that point, and especially for her to let her anger out.
And there was another place that I fell in love with the girls. I mean, they were charming anyhow, and delightfully portrayed. But it was towards the end, and you didn't know where they were, and they had gone. Tell that story where they went above the garage.
Yeah, we thought that was going to be my husband's office when he was going to do, a small practice here out of the house, but it turned out to be where we had a kind of a TV. We didn't never have cable or anything, but we used to buy those discs and stuff that go in there. And anyway, so I can't find the girls, and I walked. I said, well, they must be up there watching a movie or something. And they go up, and they are jumping around the furniture, and they're doing handsprings and forward somersaults from one pile of pillows to another, and all of this. And I'm just like, oh, so here you girls are. And they're like, yeah, we just had to work it out, Mom. You're all wrapped up in Dad, and he's dying, and we just couldn't stand it anymore. So we just decided we had to we had to jump around and have fun. I said, so then they showing me what they're doing, and it didn't look like anybody was going to break anything doing what they were doing. So I said, okay, carry on. And they wanted me to join in, but I was so far from that type of activity at that point. I couldn't join in, but yeah, I said, just don't hurt yourself. That's all. See you later. Yeah, because who knows how kids have to do their part of the end of the deal.
Right, and it was phenomenal, and we're getting close to the end here, so
yes,
I just so appreciate your being here and sharing the story, because
I'm so lucky to have the opportunity, and especially to talk to you, Barbara. It's just delightful. It's just like we're just sitting down over a cup of tea or a glass of wine or something. It's just delightful.
Well, I think that you're fun to talk to. I mean, how often do you get to talk to your doctor this way?
Well, you do more than most people, I think.
Well, I drop in with ailments now and then, but I always self-diagnose, so I cut your work in half.
That's true. So then you get to talk a little bit about other things.
But it's such a it's an honor to be able to put your story out there, because there's magic here, and there's his spirituality comes out so beautifully, and his philosophy is so greatly there, and you portray it so beautifully, even though I know you know it and I know you believe most of it, but you haven't gone into it with waders on, but it's it's there, and it's palpable, and you can feel it, and it gives you there's a sense of hope and joy here, because it was handled so beautifully. You kind of want to make sure that when your time comes, that you handle it that well,
Yeah.
So thanks again, and I will be in touch.
Okay, Barbara. Thank you, darling.
You're welcome. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye, honey.
Talk radio station.